Hello and welcome to Learning Intervals with Gene Petty. The colorful picture you see in front of you is just one of the many examples of little artistic doodles, just to add a little color and just to give you a little sense of what sort of symbols you'll be seeing along the way. So let's just dive right into it. And we're going to ask why intervals. Well, you're going to learn notes, but if you learn them through intervals, you'll certainly learn them a lot better and more thoroughly than if you just learn the notes one by one. In fact, you were already expected to have learned the notes one by one on the playlist that links from the top of the page here. And if you haven't gone over them, take a look and then come back here. And now we're going to be learning more thoroughly with intervals, and you'll be discovering the relationship between any two notes, because each note has a gravitational pull on another note depending on what key it's in and what scales are being used, and how strong the tension is between the notes. Some notes create more tension than others when they're put together, and learning intervals can allow for more communication between musicians. For instance, if you're at a rehearsal and someone says, "How about that last interval you played? It was supposed to be a major third, not a minor third." And they'll say, you could easily correct that if you understand the language. Now, what are intervals exactly? Well, intervals are defined as the space or range between two notes. You take any two notes, they can be close to each other or further apart. And they can also be laid out horizontally, as in a melody, one by one, or they can be laid on top of each other, vertically, like in a chord. And you can, if you have a chord, you have basically a series of 2 or 3 different intervals. Now, how do we learn them? Well, we're going to take the ones that occur more naturally on guitar. For instance, the open strings are tuned in a series of intervals. The frets are tuned in a certain measurement of half steps, which is a type of interval. Now, we're going to look at them on the musical staff, so you can actually read the notes and read the intervals. So we'll get a chance to play these intervals and notes on the guitar as we go. So, what are the note names? Well, you should have an idea of the note names, but don't worry if you don't know them all or have them committed to memory by now, because by the end of this you should have a better idea. So if you know the alphabet up to G, and you could say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you pretty much know the names of all the notes. You may not know all the flats and sharps, but you know the basic letter names. Located on the musical staff, these notes are laid out with 5 lines and 4 spaces. As the notes go up, the notes repeat letter names every 8 notes. It's like saying the alphabet as you ascend: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then if you go down, it's saying the alphabet backwards. Now here's a picture of the staff on the right with a line of tablature underneath. Those are just to show you the finger positionings. For instance, the first note is E. The red letter indicates the letter name. The note above it is the actual note written on the staff. The 2 below is the finger position on that particular string, which is 3rd string from the bottom, or the actual 4th string as it's called. And the second, put your finger on the 2nd fret and you get that same note, E. But now don't confuse that number with the number on the 3rd section below, where E is above the number 1. That E indicates it's the first in the series of this scale. This is a E scale, but it's not an E major scale. It's really more like a C major scale starting on E. And we're going to take the first E and we just give that a label number 1, where we give F2, G3, A4, etc. So don't confuse the tab numbers with those bottom numbers. Now, before we go any further, let me just explain. If we go above the staff, we use these ledger lines. If we go below the staff, we use ledger lines as well. As you see, the highest note here has 1, 2, 3, 4 ledger lines. We won't be delving too much, we won't be delving really high in that realm of high notes. We will be going down to the lower section, as you see. The lowest ledger line is 3 ledger lines, and that note is E, which is the lowest note on the guitar. Now, there are 5 lines and 4 spaces on the staff. Notes can be written either on a space or a line, and they can be written on ledger lines and even between ledger lines, which are actually like spaces. A clef designates what note goes on the lines and spaces. And in this case, the treble clef swirls around the note G. Second line from the bottom is G. Now, the guitar uses treble clef. Bass uses bass clef. So if you're playing a bass, that note would be B, but it would have a different clef. So we're not going to get into that. We're just going to stay with treble clef. So in intervals, we basically have to count the distance. E is given a note number 1, and if you put 2 E's together, the same note, it's called a unison. If you had 2 guitars and one guy played an E and the other guy played the same note together, that would be called a unison. And you can even do that with one guitar by playing the 5th fret on the B string and the open string E. That would provide you with a unison. That's symbolized by the number 1. Now, E to F would be a second. Number 2 is lined up below F on the bottom section there. And G has a 3, so E to G is a 3rd, E to A is a 4th, E to B is a 5th, E to C is a 6th, E to D is a 7th, and E to E, notice at the end there, E has an 8 under it, octave. That E to E is what's called an octave. 8 steps, and you always count the first step as 1, or the first note as the first step. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But that's not the whole story, because we can change a regular 2nd or 3rd to have a certain quality. It can have a diminished quality, a minor quality, a major or perfect or augmented quality. Don't get scared of these labels. We'll get to know what they're all about later. Well, one quality can change into another quality by use of sharps, naturals, and flats. A flat lowers the note a half step. A sharp raises the note a half step. Now, what is a half step? If you look on your guitar neck and you see those frets, each one of those frets is the distance of a half step. Now, a natural sign will make the note what its letter name is. So if you see that natural sign, it's usually used only because we've seen a sharp or a flat before it. We don't say the note, it's the note E natural. We don't bother saying it. It's a little redundant, so we just say E. It's the note E or the note D. We never bother saying D natural unless someone said a D sharp before that or a D flat before that, and then they'll say, okay, first it's a D sharp, then a D flat, and then a D natural. That's when we use the word natural. Now, to demonstrate intervals, we will be using only whole notes at this point, no rhythms. So you see that fat little round note, and I want you to think of not necessarily 4 beats, which it really represents in a 4/4 time signature, but a note with a fermata over it, with no time. So you can hold these notes as long as you like. Now, we're about to learn how to read notes by learning intervals, the names of notes as you learn the intervals, the qualities and relationships between any 2 notes, and each video will give you some 2-minute exercises all throughout that'll be able to impress upon you the notes in your mind and your listening abilities. And at the end of all the interval videos, we're going to give you some easy tests to help you gain some confidence, okay? So, if you feel you need some more preparation, go back and read that, or go back and look at the One Note at a Time playlist. Link is provided above. It should send you right to the playlist. You could sit back and watch about 12 videos. They're pretty short, each one's, and they cover all the notes on the guitar. And you may not absorb it, you might, but take a look at that and enjoy that, and come back here and get ready to learn note reading for guitar with intervals. See you in the next video.